Shalom. I'm Nama Rue. This is Rabbi David Rue, and welcome to our 50th video about the Shmita year, which we started in preparation for this year, 5782, on the Jewish calendar.
Yep.
It's quite a milestone.
Yes, it is.
Speaking of milestones, the land of Israel is full of all kinds of markers, of ancient markers and ancient laws.
Yes. So far we've only talked about essentially Torah laws in working the land. However, there are, just like there's Rabbinic things, Toldos on Shabbos, so too there are Rabbinic legislation concerning Shmita as well. And when we look at the basic Pesukim from which we learn the laws of Shmita, we see that only certain things are mentioned. It says in Vayikra, Uvashna Shvis Shabbos Shabboson Yeh Laaretz. On the 7th year it will be a sabbatical year for the land. Shabbos Lashem, a Sabbath of God. Sadcha lo tizra, your field you will not sow. V'charmaka lo tizmor, and your vineyard you will not prune. Esfiach ketzircha lo tiktzor, what grows from your harvest you will not harvest, meaning the things that plant themselves. V'es invade nisirecha lo tiktzor, and the growth of the vineyard you will not harvest. Shanas Shabboson Yeh Laaretz, it will be a sabbatical year for the land. So if you look at this, there are 4 types of things that are prohibited. Seeding, pruning, which in terms of Hilchos Shabbos is a subset of seeding, harvesting, and harvesting grapes, which is also a subset in Hilchos Shabbos of harvesting. So the Gemara in Moed Katan, at the end of Beis Amud Beis on Gimel Amud Aleph, says as follows: Ava Amar, Afilu Tema Rabbanan. Even if you want to say the rabbis, Avos Asa Rachmana, Toldos Lo Asa Rachmana. The primary things, meaning these 4 things were prohibited by the Torah. Everything else was not prohibited by the Torah. V'ksiv, but it says, Uvashna hashvi Shabbos Shabboson Yeh Laaretz, Sadcha lo tizra. It says that the 7th year will be a sabbatical year for the land. Your field you will not harvest. Michtei zmira beklal zriya. But we see that pruning is part of sowing. Ubetzira beklal katzira. Harvesting grapes is part of all other types of harvests. Lemai hilchasa ksivna rachmana. So why did the Torah only write these 2 toldos and not all the others? Lememra dahani toldos mechayev, ahacharinaisa lo mechayev. For these Torah things, the Torah says you're liable for violating the Shmita. For the others, you're not, or you're not punished. Velo, is this in fact correct? Ve'atanya, we learned in the Brisa, Sadcha lo tizra v'charmecha lo tizmor, that it says in the pasuk, you will not seed your field and you will not prune your vineyard. Ein li elazriya v'zimur. I only know planting and pruning. Menayan nichush uleidur likisuach. How do I know about 2 different ways of weeding and fertilizing the land? Talmud Lomer sadcha lo karmachalo. It says your field you won't do anything in it, and your vineyard you won't do anything in it. Lo kol malacha shebesradcha v'lo kol malacha shebekarmecha. No work should you do in your field, and no work should you do in your vineyard. Menayan she'en mekarsamin ve'en mizradin ve'en sigin be'ilan. How do I know? These are various things that were done. I don't want to get into the details of them, each one of them now, because some of them aren't clear, but various things that were done to help the tree grow. For instance, they often use smoke to keep certain types of insects away, or so on. Talmud Lomar, Sadcha lo karmecha lo. We know you're not allowed to do these things because it says you will not do this in your field and you will not do it in your vineyard.
And nothing to help the plants or the trees or any of the vegetation grow. We just let it be on its own. The land is resting and it takes care of itself in its own way without our manipulative, intervention.
So, yes. So it says, Lo kol malacha shebesadcha, v'lo kol malacha shebekarmecha. You're not allowed to do any vineyard in your fields. You're not allowed to do any work in your vineyard. I'm not sure I was clear on that. Menayin she'ein mezablin, ve'ein mefarkin, ve'ein ma'avkin. How do I know that I'm not allowed to put in fertilizer, that I'm not allowed to break up things, that I'm not allowed to rub certain things on branches of trees to prevent insects from getting in them? Vein ma'ashtin be'ilan, I'm not allowed to smoke the trees. Talmud lomar sadecha lo, karmecha lo. It says your field not and your vineyard not. Ol malacha shebesadcha lo, any work in your field is prohibited. Kol malacha shebekarmecha lo, any work in your vineyard is prohibited. Yachol lo yikash kesh tachas zesi, maybe I'm not allowed to work under the vines. Velo ye'ador tachas gefanim, I'm not allowed to hoe under the grapes. Velo yemale nikaim ma'im, I'm not allowed to fill the watering areas that used to dig narrow channels to water their things. Velo yaseh ugos likafanim, I'm not allowed to dig little circles around the vines to hold the water so I don't have to flood the whole field. Talmud lomer sadcha lo tizra zriya b'chlal haisa, anything you're not allowed to seed your field. Anything that is part of seeding, you're not supposed to do. V'lama yatsa, so why does it specifically say these and not all the others? Lakisha leha, to make a connection. Lomer lecha ma zriya miyuchedes avodah shebesade v'shekerem. What's true about planting is it's work that's done in both your fields and your vineyards. Av kol she'avodah shebesade v'kerem. So too, any work that's in your field or in your vineyard, you're not allowed to do. So the Gemara then says, Midurabanan v'kras machta ba'alma. This is actually only rabbinic that you're not allowed to do these things. And the Pesukim are just, we're relying on the Pesukim to give us this idea. I mean, we don't dream it up entirely. There is a hint to it at the Pesukim, but that's not actually what the Torah prohibits. Now, it's a very interesting thing. Rav Kook Paskins says a very interesting thing. If you do too many malachas d'Rabbanan, you've in fact violated a prohibition in the Torah.
What does that mean? Too many malachas?
Rabbinic types of work, like weeding in different ways, or treating your trees in many different ways so that insects won't bother.
Like basically you figure out how to take care of your garden, except for you're using all the different little funny things you can do.
We just read about 12 different types of rabbinic things that you're not allowed to do. Rav Kook says if you do a bunch of these things all the time, you have now violated the Torah law.
Exactly. Okay.
So what he says, Ose kol avodas hakarka kulo bishvis kedarko b'kol hashanim. If you do all of the types of work other than the 4 Torah prohibited works on the Shmita year, like you do on all the other years, afal pi shelo zara v'zamer v'lo katzer ubatzer, even though you didn't seed and you didn't prune, you didn't harvest your grapes, nirashu over ba'aseh shel Torah. Nonetheless, it appears you violated a Torah commandment. Klalos hashvita hi min Torah. There is a general idea in the Torah of rest. Ve'over aleha b'kvius avar adaraisa. And the one who has regularly violated this has now violated a Torah prohibition. Now, the idea seems very original to Rav Kook. However, there's a source for it in the Ramban's commentary on Chumash, which is very interesting and deserves a shir unto itself. So next time we're going to look at the Ramban, which talks both about Yantiv, Shabbos, and Shmita, and see how it's possible that even though all you're doing is something that has a rabbinic prohibition, nonetheless, you're in violation of a Torah law.
Okay, right. So I was going to say, it's our 50th video on the topic. After a while, some of the content feels redundant. Could you explain, I think if you think it's redundant, it's probably a good thing because it means you're watching enough times that it's starting to sound redundant, but we're actually covering different content.
Yes, we are.
So can you explain a little bit about what's the difference when we say the land is resting in this video versus last video versus 10 videos ago?
Well, I'd have to examine each one to say the different, but we're addressing different aspects of rest, and different ways, different challenges, different problems that we have with working with the land, and seeing what we can do and what we can't do.
So like some of it is specific to like trees, shrubs. Some of it is about, whether poor people can access it if you've declared.
Right, everything.
And also we're looking at different explanations and opinions from the leaders of the people at different times and how it applied and how it applies today. Is that
certainly true? But you have to remember that essentially, in terms of a national, in terms of significant numbers of people, it's true that after the Aliyah, after the expulsion from Spain, there were people that owned land and issues came up. Having said that, it really became an issue 160 years ago or so, where you had significant numbers of people and livelihood of entire communities that were dependent on agriculture. So
within the land of Israel.
Yes. Well, outside the land of Israel, there's no such thing as Shmita, so who cares? But these things suddenly become a burning issue of how we're going to deal with them. And in agriculture, there are hundreds of different issues involved, and all of them have to be examined, as well as in the garden and so on.
Even on a regular year, there's those laws, right?
No. There's no law restricting how you work on a regular year.
Oh, except for you have to have plants separate from each other.
That's Kalam, yes, but that's not how you work.
No, but those are just the laws of agriculture.
There are laws of agriculture, but they're not restrictive in what you're allowed to do. They may just say you have to plant this there and that there in another place, but they're not, you can plant. Here, there are things that you're not allowed to do at all.
Right. And it really makes a difference. It's a miraculous problem to have after, we've had Jews living in the land, and we did cover how these laws were always applied, always. But then, of course, with modern technology and a larger, significant population of Jewish people in the ancestral homeland now, we have to figure out, it's not our job, it's been going on, and there's rabbis, how would you describe? We've covered it before. There's experts on this, and there's recent history and old history, right? And
I think there's really only recent history on this. Really, you're talking about something in the last 160 years, which in halachic thought is less than a blink of an eye.
Right. But now I guess because the Jewish people are back in the homeland en masse.
In the last 160 years, that's why this is a burning issue.
Okay. And it's also a significant issue for Jews returning to the land to have to adjust, which is happening for me and also for you. I mean, you've been here longer, but you weren't gardening. For you, it was about where are you going to get your food from and what are you going to do with your scraps of food in the kitchen, and for me, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I grow food this year? Or I can't. Which can I harvest, right? How do I share? All right, well, I'm still learning as we go. Thank you.